This week I finally got the chance to sit down with one of the true legends of British pop, Peter Noone, the unmistakable voice of Herman's Hermits. From singing Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, to dominating the American charts in the British invasion era, Peter shares a stunning backstage view of the 1960s. The pubs, the record shops, the lunchtime cabin club sets, and the camaraderie with bands like the Kinks, the Byrds and the Beatles. But this isn't just a nostalgia trip. Peter reveals how a chance encounter at a youth club led to an impromptu performance, and why every band needed to be unique, and why the world felt just a bit safer back then, even when your stage suits were flattened by 100 lorries on the M62. Get ready for laughs, rock history, and pure storytelling gold. Now, before we start the interview proper, there's about 4 or 5 minutes of banter between Peter and myself, which is just pure magic. And I had to include it as part of the interview. Enjoy it. Oh, you got it. Well done. I was getting...
Can you see me? You can't see me, huh?
No, just what I can do is I can just ask you to start your video. It should come up with a little prompt.
There you go. Well done.
Hey,
Gotcha.
There you are, my man. Look at this.
Turn my camera around.
Yeah, that's perfect. That would be great. If you want to do widescreen, that would be wonderful. I'm just... Now, I'll get you just to sort of speak a few words. Tell me what you had for breakfast so I can see you coming up, hopefully, on the volume.
I didn't have breakfast yet. I just got up 4 minutes ago.
Are you serious?
Rock and roll.
I love you, man. I'll tell you what, at least you're honest. So, generally, did you just get up?
I didn't even comb my hair.
Look, listen, you're a star, for crying out loud. Who cares?
It's too late to worry about my hair.
That's very, very true. Very true. I'm just going to adjust your volume levels a minute. Just bear with me a second. I think I've got you up there. I think we're good to go. Hey, you know, listen, I'll tell you what, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's taken us nearly a year to get together. You've been a busy man, eh?
Yeah, you know, I'm looking at your background there, and I remember I was driving. I saw my first ever wolf. No, the slushy road.
There you go.
The scenic route to Alaska. Yeah, nice.
Isn't it?
I saw a wolf, a real wolf.
Seriously? When was that?
You know, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was on the way to the airport, you know, near the Edmonton airport.
Yeah, that's right. Because you came up and you did the Fort Road Casino, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you because we were at that concert, but you were talking to somebody at the time and I didn't want to be rude and interrupt. So I thought I'll just leave it until later, and I didn't get a chance to speak to you.
Where are you from, David? You have a nice accent.
Well, so I'm a bit of a hybrid, right? One of those Heinz 57s, because my dad was in the British military.
That's why.
So I was originally born in Glasgow. We moved around the world. We lived in Hong Kong, Germany, Cyprus. I mean, you've probably done all those gigs anyway for the military over the years. And then I originally, when we came back to the UK, it was the early 80s. Maggie Thatcher was in. We ended up in a place called Devizes in Wiltshire, just near Swindon.
Beautiful place, huh?
It is gorgeous. 20 miles north of Stonehenge. You can't knock it, you know.
It must have been nice 20 years ago. It's not quite so nice now, but what must have been fantastic 20 years ago. The town, the village, and
oh, it was just phenomenal.
And you know those English towns like that, they always have the same shops in every one.
Totally. And you're right. You know, it's changed now because it's all those secondhand shops. Shops have closed.
Yeah.
It's just lost the heart, you know, that's the thing. But yeah, so I was there for till 2009 and decided to come to Canada. So I'm living in Edmonton now, you know, Sherwood Park.
Nice.
And yeah, it's bloody cold. It's like this at the moment.
Yeah, and when it's not cold, you need your willy bobs.
Yeah, well, that's very true. But you do get some good sun here, I have to say.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. I've been there all season. I love it up there. But there you go. We'll do the interview.
Oh yeah, that's okay. No, that's fine. So where are you? You're in Santa Barbara, California at the moment. Is that right?
I live in Santa Barbara, California. Have done for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
You know, we used to commute backwards and forwards, but now we're kind of staying here most of the time. We're going back to England in February, which sounds like a mistake, but
yeah, you're probably going to get the rain. What, in Manchester or Miston, I think it is, or something? Is that where you lived?
I lived in two places like you. I'm a bit of a hybrid. I lived in Manchester and my parents lived in Liverpool. I lived with my grandparents in Manchester.
Right.
My parents lived in Liverpool.
Love it. Two great cities, man. We've got so much to talk about. Now, how much time do you have? Do you have the 60 minutes? No problems?
Yeah, let's go for that because I've got an 11 o'clock appointment. Let's do it because
I've got okay.
11 o'clock. So say 40 minutes?
Yeah,
45 minutes?
45 minutes would be great. We've got loads to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize things. I'll get started. I'll do a 3, 2, 1, and then we'll get off to the races, okay?
All right, go for it.
Well, I just had to include that little bit of banter at the start. So now let's get into the interview proper. Here we go. And I have the immense pleasure, after nearly a year, I've got Peter Noone on the line. And Peter, welcome.
Nice to see you, David. It's good to be here. I like a bit of slush in the background there. It's nice.
Yeah, you're referring to my picture of the alternative route to Alaska. Absolutely. Well, listen, man, I've never known anybody so busy as you in the pop circles at your age. And I'm being very kind here. You must be a young 70-something, okay? We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I've always been busy. I mean, it's part of my, my generation, I think. I think my generation when you were 15, if you were not busy, you were just thrown away. You've got a job in retail or something, So, we had commitments really early on. And I was lucky because my hobby was the music business. And I managed to fall in with some people who were already kind of in that business. I went to a youth club. I had the biggest and best record collection because I was wealthy compared to all the other local kids. And I collected records, mostly American records. And I went to a place called the Hartford Youth Club. And there was a group on stage called the Heartbeats. And I didn't go to see them. I went to see girls, look at girls.
Of course.
I think I was 13. And that's what 13-year-old boys do, look at girls. And one of the men they were men, they were quite a bit older than me. One of the guys came over to me and he said, "You're Peter Noone, aren't you?" And I thought, I'm going to get thumped here, And he said, "Do you know any of these songs?" And he started to, I go, "Yeah, I know them all." He said, "Would you do us a big favor and come and stand in for our singer, Malcolm Lightfoot? He hasn't shown up and we don't know what to do." So I got up on stage and I hid behind a microphone stand and I sang all the songs and I kind of enjoyed myself. I was terrified, but I sort of enjoyed it. And at the end of the evening, I think we went on for hours and hours. And in those days, luckily, there was a thing called the instrumental. And this group did like Walk, Don't Run and Apache and FBI and all those wonderful instrumental things. And I would just stand there on the stage and try and look handsome, And at the end of the evening, they asked me would I join the band.
Incredible.
And I said, I'd love to. I didn't know what that meant. Join the group. We're a beat group. Would you like? And they said, well, yeah, but yeah, I'd like to. And I said, I don't want to go Peter Noone because Peter Noone is like famous on Coronation Street. How can I have another name? And he said, yeah. And they go, you're Pete Novak. So I go, that sounds all right. Pete Novak and the Heartbeats. And we instantly got to work. And that man in the band, Alan Wrigley, he had 31 jobs. And I had 6 already. We were window cleaners. I already had a job selling programs at Old Trafford, before the game and after the game, we would sell the evening newspapers. There were 2 Manchester Evening News and Manchester Evening Standard, I think. And we sold both of those. And we would stay out until we did our concerts. And then after the concert, we'd go around all the pubs and sell the rest of the newspapers. And anything you didn't sell, you owned. So we would stay out late until everything was gone. And we were busy. And that group grew and grew and grew because we just wanted to play. It wasn't a financial thing. I remember that we did the Urmston Football Club or something. There was a little local football club. And we did it and we got paid £4. And because it was near where we lived, the petrol was only the petrol and the expenses were not quite £4. So we had enough money to stop at a chip shop on the way home. And we only got chips. We couldn't afford fish or peas.
I love it.
We just got chips. And that's it. And we kind of, without saying it, because people didn't talk much in those days, without saying it, we thought we've gone professional. We've made more money than we can spend on the gig. We can do this for a living.
So how did you get into the music sort of business? Because I know you had a little bit of a background in acting. Is that correct? You knew a little bit about that. Is that right?
Yeah. What happened was my dad was a musician in a band, like Air Force and brass bands and stuff like that. And like a lot of musicians, actually, a lot of musicians from my period had dads who traveled and went overseas and didn't spend the night there. So both my parents were well educated. When we were kids, my sister and I, my mother went to Cambridge University and my father went to Edinburgh University. And that's why we lived with our grandparents. And so my father thought it'd be a good idea because I was very interested in music, everything to do with music and pop stars and all that. You know, I liked mostly Americans. I was like a fan of American music, Dion and Roy Orbison, and my sister had all the romantic records and I had all the rock and roll dance records. And they decided that I played music incessantly, that I should go to a college of music, and they got me enrolled in a night school. And I went there, and it was after school, and I was bored there. You know, the acting class was 1 hour, and I didn't like the people in the class very much. And the music class was loaded up with people who I thought were fascinating. They were all incredibly brilliant musicians who never made a nickel in the music business, but they were all really talented people. And one day I'm looking through the window. This is a kind of story, but I was supposed to be learning music, and I wasn't really enjoying the Vivaldi stuff, although I do now. And I looked through into another room one day. There was a door, and I saw some boys in there who would be the kind of boys that I would aspire to be, even though now I look at it, I go, what a bunch of wallies. But they were playing a song, and it was a Chuck Berry song. And I, because I was, you know, I had selective onset Tourette syndrome, I always said whatever came into my head. And I said, what's that? You know, and they stopped, and they go, it's Chuck Berry. I said, what? And they, you know, I had some Chuck Berry records, but I didn't know you could play them. And they said, well, look, you bar a chord like this. And if you can bar a chord and do that with your finger, you can play all of Chuck Berry's songs. So I said, oh, I want to go at that. And it led me to the lightweight rock and roll. When I discovered that all the songs had the same roots and that you could be creative without much knowledge about the circle of fifths, then you were in it. So I started to buy records and listen to them and think how they were constructed.
Interesting.
You know, and
yeah.
And in the drama class at the same school, I mean, they don't know how impressed I was because I was kind of nonchalant. But in the drama class, they taught us about Stanislavski and people like that, and the brilliance of, you know, the method and things like that. And I thought, I didn't listen at the time, to tell you the truth. I didn't even know I'd inhaled this stuff. But once I got in my group, I realized that I could actually be the person in the song, and that people would believe it if I used my minimal acting skills to show them the way, and so to show the audience that I knew what I was talking about. And I would sing "I'll Never Dance Again," which was an old Bobby Rydell song, and I would become the person in the song, and my soul was a swaying to the beat of your heart.
I get it,
which is very interesting. So that all became part of what Herman's Hermits would be. And when we became Herman and Hermits, we knew that we had to be totally unique. We have to be unique because you can't aspire even to be the Beatles. We'd seen the Beatles in a field near my grandmother's, and the people that were with us quit being in a band that day.
Seriously? Wow.
They were so good that they thought, well, we can aspire to be as good as, we didn't know how good Bruce and Hank were, but you could aspire to be a guitar player like Bruce. But once you saw the Beatles, you realized that there was something else. It wasn't just the talent. There was some sort of something in the ether. And I decided while I was watching that show that probably these people that I was with shouldn't be in a band with me, because we were going to quit all jobs, come 100% pro and work. We're going to need to practice 12 hours a day to even catch up to what they did when they were 11.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head, though, because they did their 10,000 hours, didn't they? They did the Hamburgs and they did all the cavern, and that's where they practiced. But what motivated you, though? Because you obviously had a determination. There was something in your heart and soul that said, I can be as good as them, because you were in America. Let's be frank about it.
We never wanted to be as good as them. We wanted to be unique. And because of that, if you look back at that period, the Beatles aren't like the Rolling Stones, and the Rolling Stones aren't like the Who, and the Who aren't like Herman's Hermits, and the Herman's Hermits aren't like the Dave Clark Five, and the Dave Clark Five, and the ones that made it into that shelf, whatever you call that. There's the Beatles' top shelf with Elvis, and then there's little shelves. I know they call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I call it the shelves of rock and roll. We were on row 2 with the China Cups, and then, and it went up to diamond level, and you had to be unique. So Herman and the Hermits, when we played at the Cavern, we had to do songs that nobody else did. So we got Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter, because nobody else did it. We did I'm Leaning on a Lamppost because nobody else did it. We did Henry VIII because it was fun. And the audience knew that we didn't have aspirations band because we played against it. No girl would ever scream the word Herman. Herman. And that worked for us because we were totally unique.
And I think what was lovely about it, when you look at the performances that you did in the 60s, there was a certain amount of real fun, because I remember watching you on Pop Gear. Do you remember when you were filming the movie Pop Gear? And I don't know if you remember, you were doing I'm Into Something Good. I don't know if you remember this sort of situation you were in. It was all set up, with proper film cameras and everything. And I think it was when I think it was your bassist who was trying to make you laugh.
Well, yeah, we were always, that was the thing. If you'd seen the Beatles in the early days, you would notice that they interacted with each other all the time. It wasn't a solo singer. When I saw them the first time, it was John Lennon was the lead singer and Paul and George were the backup guys, and they had the same one microphone. He had his own mic. They shared one. And every now and then they would come over and do Roll Over Beethoven, I'm a Hog for Your Baby, or songs like that. And we connected on stage like that. The Hermits were really nice. They were good guys. Carl Green, the bass player, he was an apprentice engraver. So it was interesting that he was a Luddite already. And Derek Leckenby, the lead guitar, his dad was a police officer, police constable, it was called, who rode around Levenshulme on a bicycle. And they were really good guys. And we did musically connect. So if somebody made a mistake, we backed them up like the Marines. We took over for that moment, which is all great lesson. All actors know how to do that. If somebody forgets their lines, you have to say their line for you. You have to listen. And we figured that out ourselves, that, we needed to listen to each other. And if something was good or bad, you would still laugh. And we used to have this was the sign for turn down, arsehole, which looked like, yeah, because if you, you're too loud.
I love it. I love it so much.
The audience would see the opposite of what was going on.
It's something that I love what you've just said there, right? Those values you talk about, like you left school at 14 or 15, you got yourself a job and you got on with life, and you backed each other up. Do you think that still exists in current life, or do you think we've lost a lot of that now?
Well, remember, it was a period, it was probably one of the for 50 years, everybody in the world, my grandparents, everybody in the world for about a 50 years section of civilization did better somehow. My grandparents got a radiator in the kitchen. You know what I mean? Everybody was doing a little bit better. Not expanding like it did in the last 10 years, but for 50 years there, people did a little bit better. And we were part of the beginnings of that, when the British started the welfare state and pensions, and people weren't starving in England, and people would be able to. My grandmother would send me to the shops, and she had things on tick, which meant your name was on a board until you got ticked off, paid. I didn't know anything. I just knew that there was this, and we were all safe. My sister and I, when we were 10, I think I was 10 and she was 12. We would cycle to North Wales, which is now a suburb of Liverpool. But in those days,
yes,
it was way out there. And it was 60 miles. And my parents would wave goodbye to us, and we would leave. It was like when summer holidays, we'd leave on our bicycles for 60 miles, and we'd cycle 60 miles to my grandparents' house in town, Gronant in North Wales. And when we got there, my grandmother was happy to see us. Yeah, jam butties and everything. But my parents didn't know we were there until they received the postcard a week later. We're here, it's raining, wish you were here. That one. And then they wouldn't know where we were because she didn't have a phone. She didn't have electricity. My grandmother had no electricity, no running water, we had a primer stove, a big stove in the kitchen, and we all lived around that. And there was a thing called bath night when my sister would get the first bath and then I would get the second. But every year they did better, my grandparents, until they were old. And, they were taken care of before everybody. And there was this thing called SAFE. And I reminisce now about 1963 when 35,000 mums and dads dropped their children off at Shea Stadium and said, we'll be back at 9 o'clock to pick you up. Now, nowadays, if you drop your kids off at a stadium in the afternoon, you'd probably never see them again.
Yeah, it's different times, isn't it? It is very different.
And parents now have to be more cautious and all that. So my parents knew that I was safe because what could have happened to me? What could happen to me, possibly? I could get knocked off my bike, but that was 1 in a million. I remember that I used to sell the Manchester Evening News, and one of the stories, it was when I learned not to bother with the news because I had no power over it. I was just powerless completely over the news. And I remember reading that there was a murder near Manchester, and it was the headlines in the newspaper. Now there's a murder in Manchester every day.
Yeah.
The world changed. We were safe then. Our parents were hardworking, lower class and lower middle class working people. I can still remember seeing my mum and dad going off to work on bikes, to work. And my grandfather went on his bike to work every day of his life until they retired him, and he sat around and got miserable. But he went to work on a bike and everybody was safe. My grandmother terrorized the neighborhood because if somebody was not behaving, she would beat them up.
I just love that, But I think that's a lovely picture that you're painting. I mean, I know we kind of look back and it's rose-tinted spectacles sometimes, but the values they're real, aren't they? They're really what built you.
Yeah, as this safety thing became more prevalent, and people were allowed to, I used to take a bus and a train to school on my own. People wouldn't do that now. Your mum would take you in a Volvo.
Yes.
But then we got to see and understand where you were safe and where you weren't safe. So we got to the cavern. Bob Wooler was the owner of the cavern, and because he liked us, he didn't need to like the music in those days. We liked each other. All these people in the bands, we didn't like each other's music as much as we liked each other, and there was this enormous camaraderie going on, and people would tip you off. Watch out, he doesn't pay, so he tries to cheat you out of the dinner. And we all lived in this thing, that we were all in this same club. We were the Plumbers Union.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
General Workers Union of Musicians, because our union was not doing anything like that. So we would go to the cavern, and he liked us because we were gentlemen. We were well educated. We were better educated than the other people playing at the cavern, but we didn't know that. But he liked us. So he'd say, you can do the lunchtime session and you don't have a job or school or anything. So you can do the junior cavern after that. And bit by bit, we had big aspirations. And he let us do the nighttime cavern, which we were not ready for. The audience looked at us like, bloody hell. So we learned more at the nighttime cavern than we learned which songs would work. We better do some bluesy songs for these guys. They need to get a dance song, and we would do dance songs. So, hey, baby, won't you take a chance? Da, 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 da. So the audience, oh, yeah, I get this, and they do that funny jive thing. And we learned how to entertain because you needed to be entertaining. That was what we learned at the cavern. But because he liked us, we got 3 gigs a day there. So we would drive up to Liverpool. It's 36 miles. It would take us 4 hours to get there, because there's a hill, and the Bedford Dormobile would only go 15 miles an hour up that hill.
I remember them well.
And then we would get there, and we would There was no drugs. There was one bouncer. There was one guy who stood at the door. And I discussed it with people who were there. And they say, well, you see what happened in those days. That bouncer never let anybody who looked like trouble in. So all the trouble stayed outside. Nowadays, they let the trouble in and the fights. So it was so simple. We were completely safe. And, we would drive off to Sunderland, it seemed impossible. And we'd get in there and we'd needed the money when we got there to get the petrol to get home, but we still went.
Incredible.
Nobody had any money. Nobody had a credit card.
No, this is it.
That we were safe because we knew that the worst thing that could happen is like somebody's dad would have an auntie who lived in Sunderland who would come and loan us £5 until Christmas. There was a whole.
Yeah.
There was a whole. England was a small country, but to us it was massive because we didn't have great transportation. And as we grew as a band, we got better and better transportation until the day that we realized that the better van you had, the more respect you could get and the more, let's get better equipment because then people will think we're better than we really are because, wow, how did they get that equipment? And we would play dates at the Cavern with other people who were on the way. Lemmy was in a band called the Rockin' Vickers.
Oh, I've heard of those guys. Yeah, absolutely.
And well, Lemmy, who became famous in another band, was the singer in the Rockin' Vickers, and we would run into them and we would interact with them. And the Kinks were called the Ravens.
That's right.
And they would play the lunchtime Cavern, and we would help each other out. In the Ronnie Wood book, Ronnie he's in the Stones now, but he wasn't always in the Stones, and he was in a group called the Byrds, Birds, and they were in Manchester. This was like 1965. I mean, I had 5 records in the American top 20, but I saw them loading into a club in Manchester. And I went over and I said, listen, fellas, you need to do this. And he remembers me helping them carry their PA down the stairs there. And they couldn't believe it. They go, Herman from Herman's Hermits. You don't help the other guys out in bands. It's a sign that you're not part of the.
You're aloof.
Yeah. And we could always remember, the van breaking down or once we were going over the new M62 flyover over the Manchester Ship Canal. And we'd made a box on the top of our roof for our stage suits. And we'd spent all our money on the stage suits. And as we went over this flyover, it fell off the top of the thing and 100 lorries ran over this box.
OMG.
And there were tire marks on all over this. We still wore them that night on stage. Mine was okay. We still had to wear them because we couldn't go on stage in our street clothes. Everybody wore a suit when they went on stage. So, stuff like that was happening. But, when we were out of that van to get our stuff, traffic stopped for us. Oh, look, those lads have lost all their kit. It was different. Now they would, oh, great, let's run over the kids as well. And we were kids. I was telling my wife last night, once we were coming on the A1 and our manager at the time, Charlie, had parked his car halfway so that we wouldn't have to all be in the van for, hours and hours. Everything took hours and hours. And when we got back to his car parked in a lay-by on the A1, there was nothing left of it. It was his only possession, this car, this van, a little minivan thing.
Seriously?
And it had been all the wheels were gone. It was jacked up. So we had to go in the van the rest of the way home. But stuff like that happened. But still, you had this feeling that you were safe if you prepared yourself. We didn't know that was going to happen, but we should have expected it. It was naive.
Yeah, but the stories you're telling, these are the ones that I remember my dad and my grandpa telling me. You go to Glasgow, don't leave your car for more than 20 minutes because the wheels will be off. It'll be on bricks.
Yeah, really.
But they were great stories.
Obviously, were valuable.
Well, that's the thing, because people were poor. Everybody was poor. That was the point. But anyway, hey, listen, I just want to back the bus up because I'm conscious of time, and I know you've got to disappear in about 20 minutes. But can I just ask you one question about Herman's Hermits? Where did you get the name? What's the story behind the name?
Okay, we were playing in a pub in Wythenshawe. Can't remember the name of it or the name of the publican, but we were practicing on this little stage, and I think he let us practice there until 5:30 because that's when the pubs opened. And So at 4 o'clock, we could go after school, and we're on stage, and I had this type of glasses on, and I was on this little stage going, well, little things you say and do, right? And he goes, hey, what are you doing? And I look at him and said, isn't it like the look was, it's Buddy Holly. Well, hell, he goes, that's nothing like Buddy Holly. That's like Herman from the Bullwinkle Show.
Oh, right.
And he thought he meant Sherman from the Bullwinkle Show. So we laughed at the idea that I looked like the guy from the Bullwinkle Show and the fact that he'd got the name wrong. So, yeah, it's a good name. Herman. Yeah, Herman. Yeah, he didn't think it was anything like Buddy Holly. He thought I looked like Sherman from the Bullwinkle Show. And the band are all laughing at him, basically. And he goes, what are you bloody laughing at? Heartbeats? You call yourself the Heartbeats? You look like bloody Hermits. You dressed like... So this man named the band Herman and the Hermits. We went home that night. The drummer was called Steve Titterington. And he changed his name from Titterington to Gray. And we let him. So we went back to his mom and dad's house where we used to practice because his sister was a police constable. She was in the police department. And we went back to his house, and his mom loved the idea. And we had little cards printed, Hermits, bookings, my mom's phone number, because my mom was the only one who had a phone, and bookings and written on the card. And she made them suits, hermit suits, and she made them 4 potato sacks made out of whatever potato sacks were made of. And she just cut the arms and the legs out, and they had beetle boots. So it was like hilarious. And we laughed at each other, and I'm dressed as Pete Novak. I'm safe. I'm not in any part of this. I'm going to wear the blue suit that Herman wears. And we played the Manchester Plaza for lunchtime the next day. It was a big deal gig for us, because in those days, girls at lunchtime went to the Plaza. They'd eat their butties while they were, and a flask of tea while they were watching a band. And, girls would dance, do the jiving thing there while we were on. So when we came off stage, everybody laughed at us, even the promoter at the time. I won't mention his name because he's famously an evil guy, but the guy who brought us there, he laughed as well. Great idea, great. And when they came off stage, the guitar players they were bleeding.
Yes, because the Hessian.
So that was the only time we ever wore them. And the drummer had a shaved arse, from sitting on the drum thing. And it was really... So, but you see, like everything that happened to us appeared to be, nothing was sad. Oh, this is a cause for terrible angst, all the things that grew into monsters in the last 10 years. Didn't affect us because we were just happy with every situation. Every situation was laughable. When my grandfather drove his motorbike through the window of a china shop in, somewhere in Devon, we laughed. My grandmother beat him up with a handbag, but we laughed. My sister and I thought that was the funniest thing we'd ever seen, because he said, well, I could see in the window as he drove through. So everything was a reason for joy, really, because people hadn't had any joy in their lives. The only music that we'd ever been exposed to was from that one radio in the kitchen until we were 5 years old, when we got our own little transistor radio that we stuck in our ear. And they were great times. I look back at them and I was having a great time then as well. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
I'm not reminiscing as I wish I was. I'm having a great time now. I refuse to let anything bother me now, So the stuff was, we made these records. We suddenly moved into this thing, and one day we get Mickey Mouse to come and see us in a club in Bolton near Manchester, which was our home room, and it was called the Coffin Club inside the Beachcomber. And he came and we conned him. We got all the girls to scream and make a fuss over us as if we were famous. He signed us. We went to London. We had a fun time making I'm Into Something Good. We didn't know that it was going to be a #1 record. We just thought, well, we finally got to make a record. And then we were in the same place like a week later A week after we made the record, we're in the same place and we're in the kitchen changing because they didn't have a dressing room. And we're in the kitchen changing. And the same guy who laughed at our burlap suits plays I'm Into Something Good on the radio. We didn't know what to do because now we only ever wanted to be on the radio. Care if nobody bought the record. My mum would buy a copy, my grandma, my Auntie Celia, they'd all get a copy and that, but we'd been on the radio. We were now on the second shelf. This is the shelf of show business. We've moved off from there and we're up there now with Jerry and the Pacemakers and Freddie and the Dreamers. We're on the radio and the Beatles and Elvis and Dion and Roy Orbison. And there was a bag, interesting again, the bag of potatoes. I think it's like probably my grandparents probably only went to England because they couldn't find a potato where they lived. So we got these potatoes and across the other side of the canal, there was a deserted sewing machine factory. Deserted. Obviously, they'd gone from Bolton at least 20 years before now. The Industrial Revolution had finished in Bolton. And there were all these broken windows. And me and Al Green, the bass player, threw all the potatoes in that bag into the factory, trying to break the windows. The price of fame, a broken window. And
incredible.
That's how joyful it was. You know, we didn't know how to do anything else. Yeah, we're on the radio.
Okay, so take us. I mean, okay, Mickey Mouse got involved, and I think you had a great promoter as well, wasn't there? There was a gentleman. I'm just trying to remember his name now. That was your producer. Is that right? No, Mouse was your producer. Your promoter was oh gosh, what was his name?
We had a guy called Harvey Lisbeth who was our manager, and Danny Batesh was our agent, and they were all. Harvey Lisbeth got in the band because he liked the band when we were, I guess, Herman and the Hermits, because he'd been to a dinner and someone had asked him, what are you going to do when you get your degree at University of Manchester? And he said, I think I want to be like Brian Epstein. I'm going to sign a band and become famous. And a woman there said, I was on ferry across the Mersey last night. There used to be this thing where people would go and get pissed, really, get drunk. They would just go out. And then it was a casino and a drink. And we used to play as people slipped around in booze and vomit. But we played and we were good. We didn't know we were good, but we were good. We were entertaining, kind of. So we did mashed potato, yeah, da-da-da-da-da, and reeling and rocking. And we went around the clock 14 times. It just kept going. Dun, 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 dun. And she said, I saw this kid last night on a boat. On the ferry across the Mersey, you should sign him. I bet he's going to be a star. And he came to some place that we were playing, and he said, I want to be your manager. So I said, well, let's all meet at my mum's house. My mum lived in a really posh house, and I thought she had one of the best houses. My mum and dad had managed to make a load of money. Then they came to my house and I said, well, what do you know about music? And he said, well, I like Jerry Lee Lewis. I said, well, he likes Jerry Lee Lewis because he's my favorite. And he sat down at the piano and he said, and he played What Did I Say? And he could play it perfectly, like Jerry Lee Lewis, without any of the faffing, you know. So I said, we don't want you as a manager. We want you in. He said, I don't want to be in the band. I don't want to be in the band. I want to be your manager. So, all right, then. He seemed to be like 21 already. The guys in the band were all 15. And he discovered us, really. It wouldn't have happened without him, to tell you the truth. But I've constantly said that everybody who is there is a part of it. Nothing happens without everybody who was there being there. You know, the driver who got us to work on time and what he said in the van is on the record. In my small brains thing, you know, I paddle in a very shallow pool intellectually. And I believe that the woman who made the sandwiches when we were playing at Abbey Road, it wasn't called Abbey Road at the time. She was in a good mood and it all went into this recording. And all the recordings were made to have the same effect as when we heard that record the first time. We learned something. Oh, we want to make a record. And Mickey Most figured it out. Mickey Most, the producer, was a genius.
Absolutely.
He figured out who we were, and I would sit with him, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. If I said, you know the reverb on that, the Everly Brothers, it goes, oh yeah, he knew all those records. And like, before we made the first record, I went to his house. He lived with his in-laws in Wembley, and him and his wife, he picked up a guitar. I told him I'd seen him on a Everly Brothers tour, and he had a guitar with no strings on it. But my sister and I thought it was really cute because he'd kneel down during the guitar solo, even though he had no guitar strings.
That's so funny.
So it's kind of impressed. And he goes, oh, well, I can play the guitar. So he picks up a guitar, and him and his wife sang Devoted to You by the Everly Brothers.
Oh, great song.
You know, it was a lesson because it was a beautiful song and they meant it. They looked at each other. I'll never hurt you. I'll never lie. I'll never be untrue. I'll never give you reason to lie. And I was like, oh my God, he's an inspiration. I mean, really, really touched me in my, whatever it is, the soul. I don't, he's got to be the producer. And he made a record with, I'm crying, oh, he'll knock upon my door. Oh my God, this guy is the best thing. And we would talk about music, and we had the same. I found out recently that his brother-in-law was Gene Vincent.
No way, seriously.
Yeah, and he was best mates with Peter Grant, who was our road manager for a bit, and then became Led Zeppelin. So we had all this sort of inner connection. That's why Jimmy Page played on some records, because there was some connection between Mickey Most and Peter Grant, and like I'm saying, the person who made the sandwiches is part of it, because all part of this magical moment. Because when you make a record, it's a recording of a moment. It isn't a record. It's a recording of a moment where all these people got together in a studio. And when I sing the songs on stage, I can still remember recording There's a Kind of Hush All Over the World. And John Paul Jones had written this magical arrangement. This is before he was almost in Herman's Hermits. He conducted the orchestra in another room with a Fender Precision bass. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, there's a kind of, and he's like feeling all the thing. It's a magical moment, and I can remember every second of it. And I can remember that the band in the orchestra, the violins in the other room, are a little bit delayed in the intro, but we're only going to get one take.
That's right,
because it's upstairs to the producer, sort of like he's God. And you look up there and see if he presses that button and says, "Do it again," you just do it again. We didn't do it again. He liked that take. Mickey Most liked that take because of the energy, and I can still remember it. It's not quite perfect, but it's a recording of a moment, and sometimes it's not quite perfect.
But that's the whole point, isn't it? That's the thing. It was a captured moment in time. It's like a photograph, isn't it?
But it doesn't do that now.
No, it doesn't.
People don't do that now. I've made records now that I can't remember making because Ginger Baker was in South Africa. And the guy from Yes, the guitar player from Yes, was in his house in Ruislip. And I'm in my house in Montecito. I actually did it in a recording studio, but, it's not. And Ginger's saying, I say to Ginger Baker, where's one? And he goes, you'll be able to find it. Like, you're smart enough probably by now to find where one is. And, it's not the same, because recording something and capturing it, it doesn't matter if there's a moment, but all those Herman's Hermits records are recordings of moments.
I love it.
And Henry VIII, the recording is as long as the record.
I mean, that's just phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, when you listen to how long the Beatles took over stuff, sometimes they did it in 2 takes. If they were feeling good, and then they would come back to it months later. Listen, I'm conscious of time, Peter, because I could almost do a part 2 on this because I've got so many questions to ask you.
Well, let's do a part 2 later on.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll drop you a line and we can do that. So what I wanted to do is you're touring currently at the moment in North America, and I think you're off to Milwaukee, I think it is. Is that right, on the 19th of January? Is that correct?
This week, yeah. I'm going to the Potawatomi Casino in Milwaukee, then I'm playing in Marysville, Kentucky.
Fantastic.
Then on and on and on it goes. We've got like 100 dates this year to do, and we got, I think when I say we, I mean me and the group, and we're going to do 100 dates, and we all signed up for 10 more years. We just got to stay alive for it.
Well, okay, so how the heck are you doing it? You've got a great marriage. You've been married since 1968. You're still on the bloody road. How are you doing it, man? What's the regime?
It's what I do. People ask me, why are you still, and I look towards Mick Jagger. I say he's my dad, he hates that, but that's okay. And, I feel some sort of connection to him other than we both recorded a lot of moments. But he has that desire to keep going, because I think we know from looking at our granddads and our granddads, remember, not our dads, our granddads, that when they quit work, their lives fell apart because they'd been created to be a member of the working class, and they had no other aspirations. They never thought of holidays and retirement. It wasn't part. All they did was provide for their family. It's kind of sad, So I think that I have more in common with my grandfather than with my father, who retired and, they went on holiday. If suddenly you could get a £9 trip to Pisa in Italy from Liverpool.
That's right, yeah.
And the airport is beautiful. It says, above us only sky. It knocks me out. Every time I go to Liverpool airport, there's a sign outside. It goes, above us only sky. It's heartwarming. So
inspirational.
So, I think that's why people ask me why I do it. And they actually say, how do you do it? And I said, well, why I do it. I like working. I like getting paid for it. And I'm paid much more than I ever expected to get paid, because my agent says, you got to ask for more money. You got to work less. And I say, okay, then. And he gets me more money, and then I work more.
It's the vicious circle of life. But you know what, something? I think your personality, and as you know it, right, is so infectious. And I think when you get on stage, and I had the pleasure of seeing you at Fort Road here in Edmonton about 7 or 8 years ago, must be 9 years ago maybe. And it was amazing. I think, you transported me back to the 60s, which I adored. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for what you're doing at the moment. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you, David. It's always good. Let's do it again sometime. I enjoyed myself, especially when there's a kind of slush all over your shoulder.
There's a cue for a song somewhere in that, isn't there?
There's a kind of slush.
Well, listen, just before you go, very briefly, can you tell us how we can get a hold of some information on where you are? You've got a website, is that right?
To get in touch with Peter Noone, it's really simple. You just have to go to any browser that you've got and type in the words Peter Noone, and you'll find a way to get to me. You'll find an email address. You'll find my Facebook and my Instagram. They're all listed there. I thank you to the internet. I got on it early, and it's people can get to me and connect to each other through me.
Fantastic. We can say no better than that. Peter, you've been a pure gentleman. Thank you so much for giving me some time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks. Good talking to you. Take care of yourself.
Look after yourself. Cheers.
See you up there. Bye.
You've been listening to On Another Track with me, David Wilson. My guest today was Peter Noone, the man behind Herman's Hermits, and a living, breathing jukebox of stories from the golden age of British pop. From selling newspapers on the streets of Manchester to filling stadiums across America, Peter reminds us that sometimes the greatest paths are the ones you stumble into, especially if you say yes, get on stage, and proceed to hide behind the mic stand. Today's episode was brought to you by Commercial Food Service, proudly serving Alberta's schools, offices and daycares for more than 20 years. Visit cfsfood.ca to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations with extraordinary people who've got themselves on another track. We'll see you next time.